Hey everyone, Tactics here with another War Within beta tank preview, where in this video I'm going to be talking about Protection Warriors, checking out their talent changes they've received throughout Alpha and Beta, their Season 1 tier bonus, as well as both of their hero talent trees, and kind of giving my thoughts on how things are shaping up for them so far and what I would recommend be changed before launch to improve on them. I've already done similar videos for Protection Paladin and Guardian Druid over on my channel if you're interested. Plus, I'll have the remaining 3 tanks out as well over the next week or so. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you know when those get posted. Otherwise, let's jump into the talent tree here, where the warrior class tree has received a bit of a rework. So this looks probably pretty different. You can especially see at the bottom here, only 3 talent nodes. Shockwave was made significantly more available here, as well as the CDR from Rumbling Earth in the center of the tree, which is pretty nice. Outside of that, though, there were some kind of rage reductions to warriors across the board. I guess resources were too high in Blizzard's eye, so they've done things like Thunderous Roar, no longer generates rage. Similarly, Shockwave no longer generates rage, and Spear of Bastion, or Champion Spear, is 10 rage generated now, down from 20. They've also reduced some rage costs. This doesn't really affect Prot Warrior at all because it's things like Rend and Whirlwind, which you aren't going to be casting anyway, so you did lose a bit of rage generation here, which, you know, is a little unfortunate, especially when you're going into the beginning of an expansion and you're losing a bunch of stats. In terms of other baseline changes, one, defensive stance no longer reduces your damage taken for Protection Warriors specifically, so no major downside for not being in defensive stance. Now you're only losing like what, 3% crit chance, which is exceptionally minor. Berserker's Rage was also made into a baseline ability, so you always have that fear immunity for yourself, and you can spec into the AoE fear immunity down here. Maybe good in Mrs. Turn of Scythe. Gonna have to see how that goes, but that's an option. Now, Intervene was briefly changed to also allow you to intercept spells, which was a change I requested, but it was promptly removed in the next beta build. So we'll have to see, was adding it intentional, was removing it intentional, is it going to intercept spells? Currently it does not, but maybe it will. And then Second Wind also received a bit of a buff where it has this additional effect below 35% health, where it does heal you even if you have taken damage. And aside from that, it's talent juggling. Blood and Thunder had a thunderclap damage increase that was moved over to Crackling Thunder here, because Blood and Thunder was just kind of the default choice in all situations because of that free Ren spreading for Prot Warriors anyways. But I don't think that's going to change, but potentially maybe if you're in like a pure single target scenario and don't mind pressing the Ren button, but I have a tough time seeing that. We saw some other talent nerfs as well. Reinforced Plates is down from 20% armor to 10%. Frothing Berserker is down to refunding 25% of rage spent from 50%, so that is a pretty significant nerf here. And then of course we see the capstone shuffle, where it's kind of tough now to get Thunderous Roar because of like the gating. Like there's so much value, in these 2-point nodes in the capstone area, and there's 4 of them here, and you kind of want to, like, this is a 10% stamina. You get 5% stamina per node. That's a lot. 1% haste and attack speed increase is pretty significant for Prot Warrior. Armor to the Teeth is a huge amount of primary stat, even in Season 1, after some recent adjustments to armor. And so the weakest one is definitely Cruel Strikes, but then, you know, if you kind of want to take Armor to the Teeth here, all you can really get, I'm assuming I'd path through something down here, right? Let's just assume I spent that. You can only get like a point or two to actually like transition. You have to start moving away like your stamina and stuff like that. It's pretty rough. And so while you don't have like a 4th capstone in your bottom talent area, it is still very hard to kind of, you know, get through and get the talents you want because of how valuable these 2-point nodes are, which is a little unfortunate. The other thing too, actually, Thunderous Words got a significant nerf, where now only amps bleed damage while the bleed from Thunderous Roar is on the target. So that's why you don't feel too bad, I think, moving away from Thunderous Roar potentially to get Champion Spear, especially because, again, giving up Armor to the Teeth is probably not something you're going to do. And so Armor to the Teeth plus Champion Spear is, in my opinion, better than Cruel Strikes plus Thunderous Roar, but it's very early. Things could change. Hopefully the amount of 2-point nodes in the capstone area gets reduced in some way. I still want to see a lot of changes to warrior utility that would help them out in things like Mythic Plus keys and getting invited. I've rattled off this list in several different videos now, so I'll be quick. 1, Uncap Intimidating Shout. No idea why This AoE stop is target capped, or AoE stops in general ever are target capped. Give them access to this one. Rallying Cry has no power boost in 5-man content. Give it something there similar to Darkness. Maybe even it needs a buff in Raid, but let's not worry about that right now. Intervene. Allow it to work on spells. Briefly it did. I think it would be a kind of a niche utility you could use. Like, think about like Throne of the Tides, for example. If you could intervene that drowning debuff and spell reflect it as a DPS warrior or even a protection warrior, that's pretty sick utility. And I would really like to see that. That would be, you know, something niche to warriors, which is kind of cool. Bitter immunity, very weak cooldown. I believe it has just a 0% pick rate. Add some stuff to what it removes. Magic debuffs for sure, I think, should be added, and potentially even bleeds as well. Basically just make it, if you made it a 3-minute dwarf or just a 3-minute everything but bleeds cleanse, I think it would be a lot more useful for sure. Maybe even consider also giving warriors bloodlust. That, you know, it fits with the class fantasy definitely, and it would be another bloodlust class. It would be the first tank with the bloodlust, so I think that's not a bad thing, especially if you're just adding some of those utility aspects to other classes as well. Add another battle resin, whatever, stuff like that. Warrior needs a bit of help for sure. Losing Afflicted and Incorp potentially is pretty good for warriors because they couldn't interact with those affixes really at all, so that's nice, but still would like to see them get a little bit more baseline in the utility they're providing. The Spec tree has seen virtually no changes, so there's a couple things. Improved Heroic Throw, which was a 0% pick rate talent, has been removed. Instead, you've got Fight Through the Flames, which just makes defensive stance an additional 5% magic DR on top of it already being just a 20% sorry, general DR. So if you're in a really heavy magic damage raid fight, or in Mythic Plus keys, potentially, if you really need to survive, this is something you could pick up. It's in a bit of an awkward spot because it's competing with Best Served Cold for pathing down the tree, and the warrior tree is kind of tough to path through. And another thing, this tree has barely seen any changes since it was brought out, I think, in Dragonflight beta. So definitely potentially need something, because you feel pretty locked in. I think you have a couple flex points there, but the one thing going in this tree's favor is you have some flexibility in this individual points because of the choice nodes. They have really good choice nodes in a lot of this area. Those like potentially if you really need the extra shield wall charge, if you're surviving back-to-back things, and then they can regen, or if you don't need that in the general situation, this gives you more value and gives you some more rage den. This one here, I did spec in heavy repercussions now because I think you do need it for shield block uptime. We'll see in Mythic Plus testing, but if you didn't need this for shield block uptime, you can just get a bunch of extra haste from Into the Fray, right? So there's some decent choice nodes throughout the tree. Some of them kind of suck. Like, you never would ever pick not enduring defenses. I don't think people have ever picked not punish here. So some things could certainly use improvements. This one is a good one as well, where you kind of switch between these. But again, you're kind of point strapped right now, at least in Mythic Plus keys, because you're trying to get a lot of stuff, especially if you need spell block, and you don't really have a lot of spare points to spend on other things. Speaking of choice nodes, you'll notice a new quote-unquote choice node here at the bottom. All they've done is taken the 2 Ravager talents and smack them into a choice node, so you can only have one. They did change Dance with Death and the wording a bit. They said it's a redesign. It doesn't seem too different to me. Basically, it's now the Ravager effect has to actually be active when a mob dies to extend it. So if anything, it seems a bit worse, but I'm honest, I didn't actually play around with the old Dance of Death anyways, so not totally sure. But this is now capped also at a 6-second extension on an individual Ravager, so you can't bank these extensions for a later Ravager, is my understanding. So it's kind of whatever. I don't think, again, you have the points really to mess around with this all too much, unless you're able to get enough shield block up time that maybe you don't need, like Champion's Bulwark or something like that down the line. But at least currently, it feels pretty locked in the spec tree, no matter what build you're playing, at least for Mythic Plus. In Raid, you have a bit more options, but in Mythic Plus, feels pretty locked in. I would also like to see some changes here. I think Disrupting Shout and Challenging Shout could be rolled into a single talent, honestly. Like, you are forced to path through Challenging Shout, which still does feel a bit odd, and the least you could do is give it a bit more value. You don't even need to add the CDR in here, I think. Like, you could leave this as like a 2-minute or maybe just make it a 1.5-minute cooldown and cut it down the middle kind of thing, and give it that AoE interrupt, and I think that would be pretty nice here, and warriors would not be unhappy with having to path through that, at least in Mythic Plus. Still a bit weird in Raid, but that is something that I think would be nice to kind of save a point in the tree for Mythic Plus builds. Now let's talk about tier sets very quickly because it is quite boring, as with the other tanks and just in general this tier, because the focus is aimed at hero talents, not on the tier sets, similar to Dragonflight Season 1 and the talent trees. So our two-piece, when your Shield Slam cooldowns reset by Strategist, you gain Expert Strategist, increasing the damage of Shield Slam by 5% and reducing all damage taken by 3% for 6 seconds. And the four-piece is Shield Slam crits, increase the damage of Thunderclap and Revenge by 10% for 8 seconds. So the uptimes here, because these are both kind of proc set bonuses, the two-piece is pretty high. It's between 85 to 95% is where I was getting it hitting dummies. And then the four-piece is significantly lower. That one was between like 18 to 25% uptime on that buff, because again, you have a lot less critical strike chance. And I'm like gemmed for crit. I've got a few like very heavy crit items. Yeah, I'm gemmed for haste crit. So even trying to get to an okay level of crit, to be fair, I have a lot of PvP gear on right now, so that's a lot of verse I'd have over crit. You don't have a ton of crit, and so it's tough to actually get those four-piece procs to actually happen. Like I said, 18 to 25% depending on crits there. And it's a bit odd too, because a lot of the bonuses in this tier bonus are, again, quite weak, but they're similar to the bonuses other tanks are getting, which are entirely passive, right? Like, for example, you know, Druids is a bad example, because I think Druids is these Druids and Warriors I think have the two worst tier sets of the set. But like Druids get a passive 3% DR, 3% damage done at all times, and then also a passive 5% arcane, 5% bleed damage at all times. So obviously, you know, just comparing the two pieces there, the 3% DR at all times, this is a 3% DR and a 5% shield slam damage increase that you only have at an 85 to 95% uptime, right? So you don't have that all the time. And then that's not even considering the damage of the four-piece is not good, right? It's 10% on Thunderclap and Revenge. You're not revenging a ton. Maybe you'll revenge a bit more in Colossus. You're obviously Thunderclapping a ton in Mountain Thane, but that's only at best a 25% uptime currently, at least in normal mode gear, because it's tied to a critical strike effect, right? So potentially adjusting that in some way to be, you know, more consistent, to actually make it on the same level as some of the other tank specs, because I think it's like Brewmaster or something, and they're just getting like flat 10%, flat 20% damage increases to certain abilities, some of the other tank specs. So being a 10% damage increase to two abilities, one of which you don't use a ton, and you have to proc it with crits, is kind of rough for sure. Now let's get into the hero talents, and first up we've got Mountain Thane here, and also the animations on Mountain Thane are pretty sick. I'll solo them off to you guys, but basically the whole bit here is that some of your abilities have the chance to proc these lightning strike things, and these lightning strikes will occur more often during Avatar, and then you can amp these lightning strikes to sometimes give you rage. These lightning strikes can sometimes also, give you some free shield slams. And then it's these lightning strikes in combination with this proc called Thunder Blast. So again, Shield Slam now has the chance to give you these Thunder Blast procs, which basically juices up your Thunderclap itself. Also, when you press the Avatar cooldown, you also get 2 charges of these Thunder Blasts. So you get a couple empowered Thunderclaps, which is pretty cool. It also resets the CD of Thunderclap now. So it's all about using these Thunder Blasts whenever possible, and then these lightning strikes kind of giving you this passive damage that cleaves, and also some, like I said, potential for rage generation, potential for additional shield slam procs, that kind of thing. There's also some amps to like intervene here. Where did that go? It's in the middle. Potentially giving you a decent armor or decent shield. 3 times your armor is actually not too much right now relative to health pool. So again, Prot Warrior, you got a lot of armor. I've got a 156k armor, so that's like a 450k shield I'm giving. And as a tank, I've got like 10 million HP. DPS also have quite a bit of HP, so it's not a super sized shield yet. And potentially this node in general actually puts you in a bit of an odd situation, as I fly over to dummies, because this other one gives Stormbolt the chance to hit 2 more targets, but it also increases the cooldown. So there's potentially a situation where this shield, if it's not big enough and you still don't want to take intervene, then you would spec this anyways, and you would take something else to actually path down the tree, and you just wouldn't be spec'd into intervene, and this would literally be a dead talent point because you don't want to increase the CD of Stormbolt. I do think Prompt Warriors will take this and will, you know, find a way to spec into intervene, even if it means dropping some move speed, but that is kind of a potential issue that exists maybe for what is it, Fury, that uses this tree as well. So something to keep in mind there. But like I'm saying, the animations are pretty sick. So if you go into Avatar, you get your Thunder Blast, proc 2 of them, and you get this really big lightning-y thunderclap, which is kind of cool. It makes a big electric sound. And then like as you're hitting stuff, you're gonna see like these lightning bolts kind of come down as well on the mobs. Like there you go. So that's the lightning strikes going in. And so it's pretty cool animation wise for sure. But in terms of what it actually does differently for Prot Warrior, I mean, it's basically just like Prot Warrior, right? Like the current Prot Warrior has, you know, decent emphasis on Thunderclap, but I guess it just adds to the emphasis, right? Because you really want to use those Thunder Blast procs as much as possible. Whenever they're up, Thunder Blast is up, rip it, right? So it's very, very similar to how current Prot Warrior functions, which is a fair criticism. But if you are a fan of current Prot Warrior, I think you're going to like Mountain Thane a lot. The rage economy, like I mentioned, is down a bit baseline, but Mountain Thane does a very good job of picking that up. So Thunder Blast gives you extra rage, and like I said, you can spec here for lightning strikes to also give you some extra rage, so it feels pretty good. You also do have these avatar procs from when you don't have avatar up. Lightning strikes have a 10% chance to give you avatar for 4 seconds. The problem here is this proc rate is super low, because think about it, this is a 10% chance to work on a, what is it, 32% chance when I take this talent. Otherwise it's a 25% chance on certain abilities. So it's a percent chance on a percent chance, and they're both relatively small. This happens like once every like 2.5-3 minutes, right? So it is abysmally low. So they need to probably bump up this proc rate. Like this lightning strike proc rate, you could bump this up to like 50%, maybe 40%. Like you could bump this way up. You could bump this way up, and it would not be overpowered, I don't think so. So that needs to happen for sure. Other rage gen things though Mountain Thane offers is, again, those free shield slam procs. Again though, it's a low chance on a low chance to happen. This one feels like it does happen a bit more, because I mean it is 50% bigger than this chance, but still it is something that does give you a decent bit of extra rage when you just get a bunch of extra free shield slams to cast in a row, which is kind of nice. There's a pretty cool talent here. Actually, let me fly away from the dummies real quick. All this background noise. There is a talent here, Crashing Thunder, where Thunderclap now also benefits from seismic reverberations. So that's the Revenge talent over here, where Revenge, you know, hits an extra time if it hits 3 or more enemies. And so Thunderclap and Thunder Blast is doing that now. It's not giving you any extra rage or anything like that, but it is, you know, you are doing the extra damage of that Thunder Blast, which again, they're trying to implement some Storm Strike stuff here. So you're going to be ignoring armor and stuff with your Storm Strike damage, which is kind of cool. So this is a pretty neat talent for sure. For the defensive node, you have this choice over here where you get some base stamina, and then victory, or pending victory, sorry, gives you a short max health debuff. Not a big fan of that. This one seems significantly better. It's armor, so again, it's going to feed into your armor to the teeth kind of bonus, giving you more strength as well. And then also your Thunder Blast, so that's your empowered Thunderclaps, give you a DR. And in my testing, this uptime on this was 8% DR, was about 50%. So pretty decent uptime on this. Again, not 100% uptime, but decent overall. So generally, I like the fantasy of this. I like the lightning. I like the animations. Animations here on point on like I was mentioning, Guardian of Elune, or Guardian of Elune, what is it? Elune's Chosen for Guardian. Animations, where are they? This one, sick animations. Doesn't really change much, honestly. A little bit more Thunderclap emphasis, but it's more of a sustained damage kind of tree versus Colossus here, which is the more bursty damage tree. But not much changes to the actual base warrior spec. So let's talk Colossus then. So right off the bat, what you gain is this CD called Demolish. It's baseline 45 seconds, and it hits pretty hard to the single target, and then does a smaller hit, but it's still pretty large hit to enemies around it, reduced beyond 8 targets, so pretty big. You are forced to channel this ability, but it's not as bad as it seems as a tank player, because they added all these caveats to the ability. So you get a 10% DR while you're channeling. You're immune to stuns and knockbacks and forced movement effects, and you can still block, parry, dodge, and use defensives while you're channeling. So it's not that bad. It feels pretty fine to use as a protection warrior. You're gonna have to test it in Mythic Plus, of course, but at least in the rotation on the dummies and stuff, it didn't feel too bad, and still being able to block very good. It means you aren't going to instantly die. Now, the whole gameplay loop of this is, of course, around using Demolish, but also around gaining these Colossal Might stacks. Whenever you press Shield Slam or Execute, you get a stack of this. This is going to stack up to 10 times here from the capstone, and basically what this does is passively kind of increase things like your bleed damage, increase things like your revenge damage, and also it increases the damage of your next Demolish up to, again, 10 stacks, 10% per stack for Demolish, a double damage Demolish, and then again you can crit that. This thing was critting, I think I have like a almost 3.5 million hit in normal mode gear on this Demolish, and again this is hitting up to 8 targets. That's the primary target hit, but it's going to hit other targets as well. It is a big damage CD. Like, this thing cranks for sure. You can also reduce the cooldown of this a bit, because built in here, I believe, is, yeah, when you're at the max of 10 stacks of Colossal Might, additional things that would give you Colossal Might stacks instead put 2 seconds of CDR on Demolish. It took a while to get to the 10 stack count, so anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds depending on how lucky you were with the Shield Slam procs, right? Because the more Shield Slams you get, the more Might stacks you get. And also, again, there's another crit interaction here. Shield Slam crits again give you Colossal Might stack, so you definitely are going to be wanting a bit of crit to synergize with this and the current tier set. But you know, you get there 30 to 40 seconds depending on Shield Slam crits and Shield Slam procs, and then you'd be able to CDR. So sometimes you got, you know, maybe 4 to 6 seconds of CDR value, sometimes you got literally 2. It kind of depended. And in terms of how it lines up, though, it's pretty close to Avatar's cooldown in general. So you can, what you're most likely going to do is line this up with Avatar every single time, and maybe line every other up with like your Champion's Might Spear potentially, because it's a 1.5 CD. You know, so the CDR is probably not going to be super valuable, at least currently with current gear levels. I can see this though later on in the patch, or not the patch, rather the expansion. You got a lot more haste, you got a lot more crit. Your Shield Slams are critting a lot more. You're getting a lot more of those procs from Strategist, right? Potentially, you're going to get this down a decent bit, and that could be interesting. At least currently, though, the CDR is pretty low value, but that is something that could scale into the expansion. In terms of damage output, the one criticism I do have is that it's exceptionally Shield Slam focused. Like, if you look at your damage breakdowns for this, I wonder if I have any in here. Is this a single target one? Yeah, like this is, I think this is a single target one where it's just like Demolish, Shield Slam. Maybe there was actually some external mobs there, but it's like Demolish, Shield Slam, got a bleeds or melee, but it's like everything else is way down here. So it's a bit tough in that sense. And AoE is not much different. Your bleeds maybe rise up a little bit more, but animation wise, it's not bad either. You get this wombo combo of abilities, do a big swing at the end. It's kind of cool. But there's nothing else really to this. It's just the Demolish animation, which is like a 3-hit animation like I was showing you guys. And so it's again, it's just feels like Prompt Warrior. You know what I mean? Like, it's not any really different than current Prompt Warrior. Again, it takes the emphasis that Mountain Thane put a little bit more emphasis on Thunderclap, and it moves that out of Thunderclap and into this Demolish CD. But you don't play any differently, right? You're pressing Shield Slam. That's core to Prompt Warrior, and it's core to both of these hero talent trees. So it's still, they didn't change anything in that sense. You still want to Shield Slam as much as humanly possible, and that feeds into both of these. And so that kind of makes them feel a little bit similar, even though, again, you've got the lightning strikes and Thunderclap emphasis, you got the big burst CD. But in reality, the only difference is this is a bit more sustained in Mountain Thane, and Colossus is a bit more bursty. I am a bit disappointed in the fantasy of Colossus. Why is this a 5% size increase? You got to make me bigger. You got to make me bigger for sure at minimum. I'm a little sad we didn't get the 2-handed weapon plus shield fantasy. That would have been really cool in my opinion. Maybe there's still time, but like I said, in general, they're both hero talent trees are very minor adjustments to how Protection Warrior actually feels. And the Thunderclap / sustain damage focus first, the Demolish / burst damage focus is really all there is. The general base spec, just you're playing the exact same in both of these hero talents. You're speccing the exact same in both of these hero talents, and maybe that means they missed the mark along the line somewhere. Maybe that's not with the hero talent trees even. Maybe that's with the base spec itself. Maybe that's with the spec tree. But somewhere along the way, it feels a little off because of how this impacts you in literally no way. I would love to know what you guys think, though. Were you excited about the fantasies here? Were you hoping for something else? How are you looking forward to the War Within as a prot warrior? Let me know down in the comments below. Reminder, I've got a ton more content planned for the remainder of the beta, including tank, raid boss, and dungeon guide, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Otherwise, shout out to all of my amazing Patreons for helping to make these videos possible, and I'll see everyone in the next video.